justice delayed is justice denied, which could be why the issue of judgments being reserved for too long has been in the news. According to judicial norms and standards, judgments should be handed down within 3 months of being reserved. But this is not actually happening. The Judicial Service Commission has recommended the suspension of Judge Chifiwa Maumela for this reason. Is there a capacity crisis in our judiciary that's affecting access to justice and its timely delivery? Let's have this conversation now with Mbekezeli Benjamin from Judges Matter. Mbekezeli, good afternoon. Welcome to Today. Is there a capacity issue in our judiciary today? You might be muted, Mbekezeli.
Good afternoon, Bradan, and to the listeners. I'm sorry about that. Yes, we do have a capacity issue in the judiciary. We just don't have enough judges available for the volumes of work that are in our courts. Right now, there is a commission that has been set up by the Minister of Justice that is chaired by retired Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke to look at the kind or the number of judges that we need in our courts. In the Gauteng High Court, for example, we know that there are only about 45 judges in Pretoria and about 42 in Johannesburg. But those two courts alone deal with 52% of all civil cases that are in our higher courts, but it's only those few judges that have to carry that workload. So we do have a capacity constraint in terms of just the number of judges that we need. And on a regular basis, there needs to be acting judges appointed in order for them to carry some of the workload.
So it would be fair to deduce that judges currently are overworked?
Absolutely. The judges are overworked and overwhelmed at times. One of the things that we are seeing a lot is a number of judges, and it's becoming a trend, are taking sick leave, a long leave, just because of burnout. Judges deal with really serious crimes like rape and murder, and the kinds of evidence that are produced in court include very graphic photos of the murder scene or of the rape scene or of the damage or the injuries that have happened on the victim, and that requires a lot of psychological counseling and debriefing that we know for a fact judges are not receiving enough of. So it is also that factor of the traumatic nature of the work that they do. But I think there's also another component of it, and which is part of the cause of the delays, is that some of the judgments that need to be written require research. They require skilled research in order to do that work. The Constitutional Court, for example, has 11 judges, and each individual judge has 3 researchers allocated to them. If we go to Pretoria again, there are about 45 judges, and all of them have to share 6 researchers between them. So there's also that kind of support that judges need in order to do their work effectively that is just not there. So it is not only a problem of the individual judges, but it is a systemic problem.
Okay, I'm just thinking what could be some of the contributing factors, Mbekezeli. You've just mentioned a figure there. You've got 45 judges in Pretoria. They have very little resources. You've got 42 judges in Johannesburg. They also have fewer resources compared to the Constitutional Court judges. We'll talk about them as well shortly. And between Joburg and Pretoria, they are handling 52% of the cases. Could it be that one of the contributing factors is that too many cases that should be heard in magistrates' courts end up going to the High Court because maybe some lawyers don't want to litigate in magistrates' courts because it takes too long?
Yes, that is also a factor that actually feeds into some of the backlog that we see in our high courts. In fact, in 2010, the regional courts were given civil jurisdiction up to 400,000 rand. So, for example, if a bank wants to recover a debt, they should ideally go to the regional court to recover that amount. But what we often see is lawyers taking those cases to the High Court. So in many of the bank repossession cases that should really go to the Magistrates Court, they end up in the High Court, and they add to the workload. And lawyers give various reasons for doing so. Some of them, they say the High Courts are much more efficient in delivering the work. Others have said there's inconsistencies in the quality of justice that you receive in the different courts. And so that is why they would take their cases to the High Court. And obviously, it also boosts their fees, because lawyers charge more when they take cases to the High Courts than in the Magistrates Court.
And they also get more money. They also get more money, the lawyers, when they drag out the cases.
No, I think that's a little bit of a cynical view. But yes, there's not often an incentive to finalize a case as quickly as possible, and which is why in the High Courts there's an innovation called judicial case management, where the judges take a much more active role in ensuring that the case comes to court very quickly, and it is dealt with as quickly as possible. But there is an innovation that is recent, and it is delivering results. But I think the systemic issues of not enough resources and not enough judges will still be a factor for a long time to come.
Do you have an idea, as judges matter, how many reserved judgments is a country's judiciary currently sitting with?
Well, unfortunately, that is another problem, is that the Office of the Chief Justice, which is a national government department, they used to release a quarterly report with all the reserved judgments in a particular year. But we haven't seen that report since 2021. So the last available report that is on the OCJ website is from December of 2021. We haven't received any in all of 2022. And up to now, where we've just wrapped up the first quarter of 2023, we still have not received that judgment, that report. So information and transparency is also a problem. So unfortunately, Praten, I can't give you an answer of how many.
And that answer alone would tell me that there would be a backlog, because if in 2021 you had a particular number and we're sitting here with the scenario you've just described for us, there should be a backlog, and that is not good in the delivery of justice.
Absolutely not. We do know a little bit that there is a backlog. Chief Justice Zondo in February, when he was delivering the annual report for 2022, he did mention that there is a big criminal case backlog. There's also a backlog in the labor courts, for example. So we do, and that was a report that covered only up to September of 2022. And so in the couple of months since then, the backlog would have increased. And so it is an ongoing problem. That's why we are saying the problems seem to be systemic. There are just not enough resources given to judges. And we know also that Treasury has cut the budget that is allocated to the higher courts judiciary by some years, at least since 2016, the budget has gradually been cut. So judges now have a bigger backlog, not because of their own making, but simply because the resources in terms of financial, human resource, and library resources are just not available to them.
Okay, let's talk about the Constitutional Court judges. I don't know which year it was. You tell me, Mbekezeli, when the mandate or the remit of the Constitutional Court was changed by law in terms of expanding to deal with beyond just constitutional matters. They are dealing with much more, I understand, than just constitutional cases. For example, when people lose their cases at the SCA in Bloemfontein, the Supreme Court of Appeal, they then run to the Concord. But Constitutional Court judges, by their training, most of them, not all of them, I understand on that bench there, were trained on constitutional matters. That's putting another further strain on the workload of our justices.
Absolutely, Praten. That actually was done by the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, which was introduced in about 2013. The Constitutional Court, as you rightly say, before 2013 used to only deal with constitutional issues. But in 2013, the jurisdiction of the court was expanded to deal with all appeals as the final court of appeal, and that has also added its backlog. So we are lucky that most of the judges in the Constitutional Court do have a lot of experience in constitutional law, but some of them have broader experience in tax law, in criminal law, in labor law, and so are able to deal with the cases. But the problem at the Constitutional Court is that in 1994, there were 11 judge positions created, and that was meant to deal with only constitutional issues. In 2013, when the court's jurisdiction was expanded, they never added more judges. So the 11 judges are now have to deal with all manner of cases, which is also adding to the backlog. Even recently, we saw the Constitutional Court taking upwards of a year to deal with the judgment. And that is also not a good place to be. And we know that the Constitutional Court judges are working hard, and they say that they don't have weekends or public holidays, but it's a problem not of their own making. When Parliament changed the law, they didn't make additional posts available to carry the workload that came with the 17th Amendment to the Constitution.
So is it Parliament only that appoints Concord judges, eh?
So the Parliament firstly has to amend the law to make provision for more than 11 justices, because the Constitution says that there are only 11 judicial posts in the Constitutional Court. So Parliament has to rewrite the law to make it more than 11. But once those posts are created, then it will be the responsibility of the Judicial Service Commission to appoint the judges to those posts.
Yeah, so your view is we would need more judges at the Concord?
Well, that's just one, right? We need more judges. We need a more efficient administrative system in the Constitutional Court. We also need to change how the Constitutional Court works, because as was tradition, that all 11 judges sit in all of the cases. But as we are seeing, it's no longer feasible. So maybe we should use the system that is used at the Supreme Court of Appeal, where about 3 to 5 judges deal with a single case, and the others are able to deal with other cases. So they sit in panels. Maybe that's one way to deal with the backlog. But there is a need for more judges.
Should the country build more courts as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's probably one of the easiest way to deal with this problem. We need more courts, more courtrooms, and then those would be able to house more judges. A province like KZN, for example, only has courts in Durban and Pietermaritzburg. The whole of the north of the province doesn't have any courts. And so having maybe a high courts division in the northern parts of KZN or in the northern parts of Mpumalanga would address some of the big backlogs that we're seeing in the high courts. It would relieve a lot of the pressure and also bring justice closer to the people.
In terms of resourcing the judiciary appropriately, as you've highlighted, Mbekezeli, is it Ronald Lamula's remit, together with the public works, when it comes to building? Who should make the call, for example, that we need to build a court in Ulundi, in the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal, or in Richards Bay, or wherever in the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal?
So this is one of the areas, building of new courts is one of the areas where you need a whole government approach. Firstly, you need public works to provide the building and making sure that the building functions. You need the justice minister also to play a role, but you need the judiciary to also cooperate, because they know exactly what the needs of that are there in that particular community, what kind of cases that community faces. And so you will need to consult the judges quite closely, but also you need some sort of supporting infrastructure. You need roads, you need transport networks for people to be able to get to the court. So it is a whole government approach. But yes, it primarily needs the Minister of Justice working with the Chief Justice and the Minister of Public Works in order for there to be a court building.
Mbekezeli, what is your view if I say to you the JSE is wrongly constituted, too many politicians, and too few lawyers, practitioners, judges, and law professionals?
So South Africa has a unique model when it comes to the Judicial Service Commission. It is much more representative than you would find in most other countries in the world. In the United States, judges are only appointed by politicians. In India, judges are only appointed by judges, and that is a problem in both of those countries. So in South Africa, we've tried to strike a balance between the politicians and the judges. And the reason why we would need politicians to be involved in the process is because they represent the interests of the public. Lawyers, being lawyers, have certain blind spots, right? When you are looking at a judge and you're looking at the qualities that one would need to be a judge, you look at those that impress you as a lawyer, but you don't look at the broader issues that concern South Africans, right? For example, you need diverse language, cultural representatives on the courts. You need a diversity in terms of skills and abilities. And so when you are appointing judges, you don't only look at their experience in the law, which is important, but you look at much more than that. And that's what politicians try to add in this process.
Okay. Now, final question to you. I mean, you've mentioned the need for resources, but you've mentioned the need for transparency. The Chief Justice Office has not given us an updated number of reserve judgments since 2021. And that cannot be good, because we do get a sense that judges are overworked. You say they've got mental health challenges, they are traumatized, and they're not delivering. That's going to affect the quality as well of the judgments that are being delivered. Is there a need for bolder leadership in the judiciary?
Look, I think the issue really is more of a resource and capacitation problem. The overwhelming number of judges in our country work extremely hard. They are very careful about producing high quality judgments. But like I said, the resource constraints make it impossible to deliver judgment at the speed at which South Africans expect. So the resource issue is a big one. And of course, we could have a little bit more leadership, right, in terms of moving these issues along. And it's not only leadership from the judiciary's perspective. We could maybe have a champion in Treasury or in the Minister of Finance who would be able to speak to some of the issues that concern the judiciary in terms of resources. And so it is a complex issue, resources being the first one. Leadership would also have an important contributor in addressing the challenges of justice in our country.
Mbekezeli Benjamin from Judges Matters, thank you for your time and your insights regarding the issue of the capacity of our judiciary.